Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Claire Bratton. I'd like to discuss Chapter 5 with you today. And Chapter 5 focuses on modern biological theories of crime. Let me share my PowerPoint. So, the modern biological theories of crime started with the creation of the Human Genome Project. This project basically tries to map the entire human genome, which is the complete copy of the entire set of human gene instructions. Just some concepts that we need to learn. Genes are made of DNA and they carry coded instructions, whereas chromosomes are bundles of genes. So the Human Genome Project, or HGP, determined the complete chemical sequence of the human DNA. After this was completed, the current focus of genomics research is finding variants from the reference sequence. So one consequence and one outcome of this study is that they hope to develop public policy options related to crime prevention and offender treatment that uses biological basis or biological theories of crime. These two next slides look at videos, so you can go to Blackboard and view the view the video in Blackboard. Okay, so genetics and heritability. Dutch researchers claimed that male descendants of a criminal family is genetically driven to criminality. And they pointed out that this is because of the presence of monoamine oxidase A, which is MAO-A. This is an enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters, serotonin and noradrenaline. So what are these neurotransmitters? As we know, serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is responsible for one's general emotional well-being and sense of happiness. On the other hand, noradrenaline is a treatment for low blood pressure and also can help with heart failure. So this study showed that excess amounts of MAO-A was linked to aggression, and men who had a mutated gene that produced less MAO-A was more likely to engage in criminal behavior. One study on the MAO-A was conducted by Caspi and Moffitt. So what they did was they used data from the Dunedin Multidisciplinary Health and Development Longitudinal Study, which consists of 1,037 children born between 1972 and 1973. They found that not all maltreated children grow up to be criminals. And they also stated that antisocial behavior is mediated by the interaction between MAO-A and early child abuse. So meaning that maltreated children with insufficient MAO-A predispose them to adult violence. However, maltreated children with high MAO-A did not develop antisocial behavior. So it's the lack or deficiency in MAO-A that predisposes one to adult behavior in combination with maltreatment. So here you see that their study combines both biological explanation and sociological explanation, which is exposure to maltreatment as children. Another study found that pleasure-seeking gene allele may also play a role in deviant behavior, such as addictions and violence. They also adhere to the gene environment interaction model, saying that childhood maltreatment is a universal risk factor for antisocial behavior, but antisocial behavior is mediated by the interaction between MAO-A and early child maltreatment. What is hereditability? Hereditability refers to the amount of variation in traits of a population attributable to genetic factors. This has been linked to callous, unemotional behavior and differences in self-control. The environment formula, gene by environment formulas, indicates that there has to be an interaction between genetics and environment. So the sole presence of either genes or abusive environment is not sufficient to explain antisocial behavior, meaning that both genes, a genetic predisposition to commit violence, and social factors lead one to commit crime. What is epigenetics? Epigenetics is a study of chemical reactions occurring within a genome and which switch parts of genome on or off. On the other hand, gene expression is a process by which coded information in a gene is used to create a biological product. It is regulated by factors such as stress, diet, behavior, and toxins. What are some future directions in the study of genes and crime? There's the feeling that explanatory power of heritability is limited, and it only may apply to specific environments that existed at the time of a given study. So if the population or environment changes, heritability may change also. So what does this tell us? Genes shape us and are also influenced by our environment. So it's a feedback loop, one affecting the other and being affected by the other. Another future direction in the study of genes and crime is genetic memory. This simply means that memory can be inherited and passed down from one generation to another. And inherited memory is independent of interaction, learning, or socialization. In fact, it may provide the basis for phobias, anxieties, etc. In one study, for example, that proves genetic memory, female mice were trained to avoid adverse stimulus, and they passed on the behavior to offsprings who were never exposed to that stimulus. So this was purely genetic memory. The offsprings somehow obtained that behavior through the passing on of the memory from the female mothers. Now let's look at the dysfunctional brain. Researchers associate prefrontal cortex dysfunction with criminality. So what does this mean? So sometimes there may be some deficiencies in the functioning of the prefrontal cortex, and this brain condition may negatively impact social skills and moral reasoning. In fact, prefrontal cortex dysfunction may predispose someone to crime rather than being a direct cause of crime. Neurocriminology is a perspective that examines neurological links between organism, social factors, and criminal behavior. The frontal brain hypothesis states that physical changes in certain parts of the brain may explain criminality. Also, allergic reactions to foods have been linked to violence and homicide. Allergy may result in swelling of the brain and brainstem and may impede higher faculties, reducing the sense of morality and creating conditions that support impulsive behavior. So this slide shows us an image of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex is the front part of the brain, and the amygdala, this red thing over here, regulates emotions. So both deficiencies and abnormalities at the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala have been associated with increased criminality. Injuries, emotional trauma, disease, and stress can lead to changes in the brain. There have been studies showing the link between stressors in the social environment and brain structure. Some studies discuss neuroplasticity, which states that the brain can alter structure or function in response to experience or injury. For example, if one part of the brain is rendered incapable of functioning due to a stroke, studies indicate that surrounding parts of the brain can assume the functions of that part that had been rendered inactive or inoperable. Now let's look at body chemistry and criminality. Body chemistry is influenced by factors such as eating habits, vitamin deficiencies, environmental contaminants, and the endocrine system. You really are what you eat. In one study by Helland in 2003, she found that maternal diet during pregnancy affects infant IQ and early infant behavior. What the study did was to supplement the diet of pregnant and lactating women by giving some of them omega 3 DHA and giving others omega 6 fatty acids. She found that the mothers or the lactating women who were given omega 3 DHA had offsprings who had higher IQ and who performed better in problem solving tests compared to women who were given the omega 6 fatty acids. So apparently from the study, omega 3 DHA is better than omega 6 fatty acids. Now, current evidence on the current behavior of current sugar and criminal behavior link is unclear. So there are studies trying to find the link between sugar and antisocial behavior is mixed. Some support the link and the others show that there is no association. Other studies show that food additives such as MSG and artificial flavorings are linked to violence. Coffee and sugar may trigger antisocial behavior. Vitamins and other nutrients may have also antisocial behavior impact or conforming behavior. And finally, there is a link between breastfeeding and later intelligence in children. With regard to environmental pollution, several studies found the link between industrial and environmental pollution and violent crime. There is a correlation between juvenile crime and exposure to lead and manganese. In fact, some studies show that prenatal substance exposures to lead and manganese may lead to higher rates of conduct disorders, delinquency, and other psychiatric problems. Psychobiotics study the psychological and behavioral effects of bacteria on the mind, feelings, emotions, and behavior. The central focus is on the gut bacteria. All of us have gut bacteria in our guts, which help regulate or help produce positive results in our mood and behavior. So the absence of that gut bacteria may lead one to be anxious, depressed, and engaged in antisocial behavior. Now let's look at hormones and criminality. Hormone regulates and controls the activity of cells or organs. Studies show that high testosterone levels in the blood is linked to increased male aggressiveness. However, the effect may be moderated by social environment. Small changes in female testosterone levels are also linked to personality changes. Fluctuations in female hormones may also be linked to crime. One hormone that we know is the serotonin. When you exercise, it increases serotonin and endorphin levels in your bloodstream. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and it plays an important role in regulating learning, mood, and sleep. So this is a behavior regulating chemical. Elevated blood levels, signifying lower brain levels, have been linked to violence in men. Imbalance between levels of serotonin and dopamine is highly associated with psychopathic traits. Another study shows that cortisol, which is the chemical released when you're stressed, and T3, which is a thyroid hormone, is linked to delinquency and poor impulse control. On the other hand, increased oxytocin levels are linked to trust and altruism. Circadian rhythms may also influence brain chemistry. And changes in hormone levels alone do not account for aggressive behavior. Humans may interact with social factors to produce criminal behavior. Now let's look at the link between low resting heart rate and crime. People who consistently engage in antisocial behavior tend to exhibit low resting heart rates. In fact, this may be the best replicated biological correlate of antisocial behavior. However, the relationship is not fully explained, and the association only appears to hold for males. Galvanic skin response studies also abound, and they try to explain behavior in terms of galvanic skin response or skin conductivity. So what is galvanic skin response? When your heart rate increases, you have rapid breathing, sweating, decreased salivation, increased electrical conductivity of skin in response to external stimuli. In a normal person, all of this would be at normal levels, meaning that you would show all of these galvanic skin response. But in antisocial criminals or individuals or who have negative traits, they have low galvanic skin response, meaning that in response to external negative stimuli, they don't show any of these skin responses. Let's look at the digit ratio. Okay, put up your hands, and how do you measure the digit ratio? If your index finger is higher than your ring finger, you have a high digit ratio. On the other hand, if your ring finger is higher than your index finger, you have a low digit ratio. Here, see? You can see that I have a high digit ratio. My index finger is higher, or at least as high as a ring finger. So how is this relevant? Some studies show that a low digit ratio is linked to criminality. Okay? Tends to be lower in men, and men who have low digit ratio tend to exhibit stereotypical male characteristics, and they say are more aggressive. Let's look at this. So if the index finger and ring finger are of equal length, okay, probably in women, higher fertility, higher risk of breast cancer, lower levels of autism, less promiscuous and fewer sexual partners, and lower levels of ADHD. So that's me. We have the same, my index finger and ring finger are of equal length. Now, if the index finger is shorter than the ring finger, if I can't, see, if it's like this somehow. For men, there's a tendency towards alcoholism and aggression, more athletic, larger number of sex partners, 5 times higher profits for financial traders, more attractive and symmetrical, but not more masculine face. So take a look at your ring finger and index finger and see where you fall in this chart. Now, another study looks at climate, weather, and crime. Studies indicate that temperature is the only weather variable consistently related to crime. There is an overall positive relationship between temperature and violent crime, although this relationship is moderated by temporal factors. Research findings on climate and crime is consistent with routine activities theory. So you'll see here a chart showing that the higher the level, the higher the temperature, the higher the crime rate. But if it's cold, if it's too cold, then the crime rate decreases. If it's too hot, again, the crime rate slackens off, also decreases. Crime and human nature. This is a comprehensive theory of crime that involved constitutional factors. The key factors include gender, age, body type, intelligence, and personality. And this states that constitutional factors predispose one to specific types of behavior. Societal reactions to predispositions determine the form of continued behavior. What is biosocial criminology? Biosocial criminology tries to understand behavior by looking at the interaction between biology and the physical and social environments. So these theories postulate that biological factors do not operate in an environmental vacuum. Environmental factors also do not operate in a biological vacuum. They coexist and they influence and are affected by the other. So biology and environment, nature and nurture. There are also gender differences in criminality. If we look at the gender ratio problem, we need to explain the fact that men are far more involved in crime than women. In fact, the extent of male-female criminality in the US is stable over time. Early explanations claim that social inequality, meaning the equality between men and women experienced in modern society, would also generate equality in crime commission, meaning that women would also increase their criminality. However, this has not been validated, and today, women are less involved in crime compared to men in figures that are not commensurate to the level of women in the general population. So if you look at this, figure 5.4 looks at the percentage distribution of persons convicted of homicide by sex and by region. In the Americas, women constitute only 4%, in Asia 5%, Europe 8%, and global 53 countries, they only constitute 5% of the population of offenders. Biological criminologists suggest that the organic correlates of gender explain gender gap in crime. For example, sexual selection. This is a form of natural selection influencing the ability to find or choose a mate. Another explanation would be evolutionary perspective, wherein this perspective seeks to explain behavior with reference to evolutionary history, recognizes the influence of genes on human traits. The evolutionary neuroandrogenic theory states that the propensity of males for crime commission evolved as part of the male reproductive strategy because they want to get resources, okay, and they have to compete for resources, they have to be naturally aggressive. What are the policy implications of biological theories? Steven Pinker claims that social scientists, including criminologists, unjustly ignore the biological basis of human behavior and replace it with three myths. The first myth is the blank slate myth, meaning that this myth states that the mind has no innate traits at birth and the mind and the person is fully malleable by society. So this is a fallacy according to Steven Pinker. The second myth is the noble savage myth, which states that human nature is intrinsically good. And the third myth is the ghost in the machine myth, which states that humans have soul-like quality that allows her to make choices independent of biological predispositions. So these three myths make up the standard social science model of modern era, and they disregard the role of biology. They have led to misguided social and political policies. Ellis and Walsh argue that in the case of behavior, nearly all effects of genes are indirect. They are mediated through complex chains of events occurring in the brain. So, what does this tell us? There is no gene for criminal behavior. On the other hand, genes may affect brain functioning and influence chances of learning socially unacceptable behavior patterns. What are some critiques of biological and biosocial theories? These fail to predict criminality accurately. There are also methodological problems, such as small sample size, non-random offender population. Because of this, the findings are difficult to generalize. They also do not explain regional and temporal variations in crime rates. And some biological criminologists have been accused of racial and class bias. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed today's lecture. I'll see you in next lecture.